Good afternoon and welcome to Shortlist Showcase as part of the 2020 Queensland Architecture Awards. My name's Julie Beveridge and I'm the National Manager of CPD Coordination and Delivery here at the Institute, and it's my pleasure to be here with you this afternoon as we walk through the shortlisted projects in the Roderick Award for Heritage Architecture. Today we will be hearing from Stephen Sims of Sims White Architects, twice in fact, Melissa Hughes and Hamilton Wilson of Wilson Architects, and Morgan Jenkins of Nelson Jenkins. First up today, you'll hear from Stephen Sims, who, like I said, you'll be hearing from twice today because he doesn't hide his light under a bushel and got shortlisted for 2 projects in this category. So he's going to be topping and tailing the session today. Stephen, I will leave it up to you which project you'd like to start with. You can choose Toowoomba City Hall Auditorium or Annex or the Shed. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Julie. I'll just share the screen and we'll get started. Okay. Hang on. Whoop. Can we see that? Okay. So this is Toowoomba City Hall. It's probably the first large project we as a firm managed to land, and one that we're pretty proud to win and do as locals. For those of you that know Toowoomba, that's the facade of City Hall that everybody knows and loves, and it has this this parkland down the side, and it's now got this wonderful civic green at the rear. And our commission was basically to reinstate the theatre that sits at the back of City Hall, and to build a new auditorium and annex onto the fronting onto the park. So the next slide. So for those of you that know Toowoomba or don't know Toowoomba, can you see my mouse cursor? Is that showing up? This is James Street that comes at the top of the range that everybody seems to know, the tourist information at the bottom. The main streets of Toowoomba, that's Queen's Park, everybody knows. Margaret Street and Ruthven Street. City Hall sits on the south corner of the CBD. The other project we're talking about, the Good Shed, is up here at the northern edge. But Toowoomba is interesting because it has 4 parks on the 4 cardinal points of the city. It's got 2 big ones on the east and west, and then 2 smaller ones on the north and the south now. So City Hall is located on this, fronting onto this green here that sort of, it really acts a bit like King George Square does in Brisbane. This is the large shopping centre in town. The library's here, the RSL here, Council's admin building here, and City Hall itself here. And there's a plan to build a new civic building here for Toowoomba Regional Council, and then to basically create this sort of strip park here that will link through into this area to provide a green space. And it's a sort of space that gets used a lot by people at lunchtime in the city as one of the few bits of places you can sit. So this is the building as it was. It was designed by Willoughby Powell and built in 1900. It was the 3rd town hall. It basically has a classical sort of style, the veranda on the front, this sort of formal lobby through here that comes on access to the original theatre, that also had exits to the rear and a sort of formal entrance here. And it, at the time it was built, had this horseshoe-shaped gallery upstairs and these light wells on each side. So these are the original drawings that we had from the 1890s. Horseshoe-shaped gallery, this sort of classical pilasters. What do you call them? Naturally ventilated sort of thermal chimneys, ventilations in the roof. The clock tower that was built is actually different. There is a story behind that, but that's probably for another day. So it was refurbed in 1939 in an Art Deco style. And those of you that know Toowoomba will know of the Empire Theatre and our magic Art Deco Theatre. And this one is kind of like the poor cousin to the Empire Theatre. So in the 1930s, they raised the roof, they changed it, they put a projection box in, and they put a flat gallery in. So this is all we had. It was refurbed again in 1971, as you'll see, in a very 1970s style, which you'll see some photos of later, but raking seating, Luxolon ceilings, and lovely, lots of purple and orange and teal. But all we had to go on were 4 photographs and these demolition drawings of the original 1930s interior. So this is the 1970s floor plate, and I've rotated these all so that they're all orientated the same way. Entrance in, and then you sort of had to come around here and upper half level and in through some stairs to actually get in. There was no disabled access. And basically in the 90s, shortly after I came to Toowoomba, it was closed down because it just was basically unusable. So here you have it as we found it. Tassie oak cladding, purple carpet, teal, Luxolon ceilings. This is the rear. It was a car park basically with a bunch of fire escapes on it. And these are the 4 photographs of what we had to reinstate the building from. This curtain is amazing as a little side thing. It's actually down in the Empire Theatre being stored. It's, I think, 8 metres wide by 5 metres high. And that is flat. That is all hand painted. And it has this amazing view from the 1930s of a horse and cart, or a car coming up the road with tabletop in the background. So from a heritage point of view, we did an early works package to look at what we could find, and certainly the original 1939 ceiling and a lot of the timber work was still there, which was why the decision was made to reinstate the 1930s interior rather than the earlier one. It was considered quite elaborate, but you see in these photographs that the pilasters and this stenciling that was all there from the 1900 version. So here's the floor plan as we did it. You can still see the access is here. You come in through here. There's a beautiful red cedar stair that goes upstairs. The council chambers are upstairs. The councillors themselves inhabit City Hall. And then there's this sort of courtyard here done in the 90s by, I think it was Buchanan's. No, it wasn't. It'll come back to me. Comes straight through into the theatre. The proscenium and was reconstructed, and then basically the new foyer onto the rear here, opening out onto this new park on the rear. So from a public perspective, it was an interesting brief because it had to work as something that council could use and work from the City Hall side, but also it had to work from the public side as a venue that could be let out to the public, so that there could be access in this way or access in this way, but we could have line of security either way as needed. So the program's fairly simple. Basically, we have a lobby here, about a 600mm rise up to another small sort of gathering space, a set of toilets here, the theatre itself, a new bar and canteen kitchen at the rear, and the stage area was pretty well left as it was. Downstairs, there's a set of public toilets, which is sort of half a level below ground, and that was sort of intended to remain there. And then on the upper level, there is a gallery that links through at grade to council chambers themselves are here. And the idea was that this could be used at the same time as the theatre downstairs, or separately, or both at the same time. So that's the program in a nutshell. So from a heritage point of view, we had a site boundary which was right here. And we basically were trying to tie the building to this parapet line that existed on the end of the building, and just keep it as a simple volume that was sort of subservient. We'll talk more about that in a moment. So here it is. I've got a little video I'm going to show you of that our photographer took, and it'll give you an idea of the actual space. So here's the place fronting on the park. These laser cut screens basically taken the motif from the original building. That's the green. Secondary play area. And we worked really hard on this connection on the inside between the old and inside the theatre itself. So we just went to the stadium. The ceiling was all repaired. Oh, sorry. Next slide. So, from our point of view, it really did become two projects in one. So there was a heritage reconstruction project of the theatre itself, and then there was this civic public facade. So the heritage we sort of loosely touched on. We did this demolition works, and we found a lot of original stuff, like this wallpaper up here, which we had reproduced in laser cut Ortex to improve the sound rating. We found little chunks of this sound deadening material here, which our acoustics engineer helped us find a product very similar. And then we found remnants of dark stained silky oak ply, which was reinstated stained. And so you see in the building, all of the plywood is silky oak, and it's clear finished where we've made a new insertion, and it's this dark chocolate brown as per the original, where it's a reconstruction. So there's this sort of language through the building of leaving a trail there for those that are interested. So here's the dark stained ply, and we were really excited when we found these windows here because they were bricked up on the outside. And this beam here is about 2.5 to 3 feet deep, cast iron, and it used to sit up here, and it's the original beam that that held up the 1930s mezzanine, and it's still there because it was too hard to get out. So, you know, this little piece here was a little remnant we left of. So we've reinstated the 1930s interior, but it's this piece that lived here. And we wanted to leave a piece of that 1890s piece, and then a tiny little piece of the 1970s interior that was left there of the tiles from the toilets that used to be there. So for us, one of the key things was about making the building sort of subservient, but also having this clear demarcation between the old and the new. So there's this slice that sits in between our extension and the existing here, that's got a glass floor and a glass roof and a glass end. And when you step through the space, when you actually step between the two, you actually have this feeling almost of being outside. And we deliberately use sort of external cladding in this zone to give you that really strong sense of leaving one building to the other. But the other magic thing it does is this: you get this amazing light here during the day, and at night time light drips down there as well, and you see this original bluestone footing. So we also had a lot of fun reusing and reinterpreting materials. So Talomba is a bluestone and red brick town, so we've got red brick. Well, we've got a lot of the red sort of earthy colours in the new building, and then we've used bluestone. But whereas it was rustic in the original building, it's this sort of refined palette in the new. But all of this terrazzo is is the original toilet partitions that was reused as in the original. So here's the interior. The ceiling was touched up and made good. All of the walls were reinstated. The proscenium was rebuilt up to about this level using traditional plaster techniques. The LED lights were reproduced from photos and from measuring markings and whatnot that was still on the ceiling. This is that door that enters on axis from the front entrance to City Hall. Air conditioning was fun. The building was never designed to be air conditioning, and stashing the plant up in the roof space and finding routes to get the ductwork down was also fun. But in the end, it's something that we're really proud of. Carpet's a reproduction of what was there, including these borders. And, you know, council love it. They're thrilled with us. So from the heritage, that's the reconstruction part was fairly straightforward. The how the aesthetics of the extension and how that works with the city is something that sort of came next, and we wanted them to be informed and have a conversation. So, you know, this is the concept that was done by Yelia that we were presented with, and we worked hard to go, well, this to us was far more evocative of the Art Deco, you know, the neon, the lights, and all of those sorts of things. And look, this is the surrounds that we had to work with as well. So we wanted a building that had that context. So there was this whole thing about narrow verticals, neon, and for us, we worked really hard to try and create a facade that would actually reflect that and live that Art Deco spirit. So we prototyped a lot of things and got very excited when we realised that yes, we could make it work facing west, and yes, we could make it glow. So we were pretty excited when we'd done this prototyping and got it working, and then this RGB lighting lets it be whatever colour it can be. And it also lets that facade be transparent, which facing west was no big, no small challenge. So here it is fronting onto the Civic Square. It has this little spill out space at the lawn, which is about 600 mil higher, sheltered from the southwesterlies, which is really important in Toowoomba. And it just sits onto that green. So, and has this sort of relationship with it, all sort of under that canopy, which is so apparent when you're actually there. And probably, you know, for us, what makes us thrilled about it is just the level of engagement and the how successful it's been. It's one of those things that the kitchen we put in is too small because the number of events and the size of events that they're now catering for has overtaken any sort of sense of demand. So anyway, I just about out of time, so I'm going to quickly scoot through these, but there you have it. I mean, that sort of embodies that transparency that we were trying to create, but at the same time, a sense of that connection between the building and the city, but also it has a feeling that those spaces are quite distinct and separate. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Stephen. That was a really interesting journey that you took us on there. Next up is Melissa Hughes and Hamilton Wilson, who couldn't be here in person today to present live, as it were, but I was lucky enough to catch up with them both earlier in the week, and we'll play you a recording of their presentation now.
Thanks, Julie, for that intro. I'm Hamilton Wilson. This is...
I'm Melissa Hughes. I was project leader of this particular project.
The project is Addington House of Heart and Mercy. The building started its life in 1859, built by Petrie, and then taken over, it was a private residence, and then taken over a couple of years later by the Sisters of Mercy, who then progressively expanded the building and the site, which eventually became All Hallows School. You can see the plan of the grey section of Adderton right at the front there, and then you can also recognise the amount of extensions that this little tiny building eventually had to take. So the project from our perspective was predominantly to create a disability access. The building has multiple levels. It's not just across the major levels. It's across the floor plate as well. We also need to look at safety as well as creating spaces that were suitable for rolling curatorial exhibitions.
So there were two concepts surrounding the project for us. The first one was revealing the heritage fabric, and a lot of work went into peeling back all of the layers of the building. We collaborated with a lot of specialist trades to repair and maintain the building's fabric, and you can see some of that as we started to reveal and peel back some of those layers. In particular, the deck. So where all of the accessibility kind of interventions were made were on the front and rear verandas, and a lot of the material was actually quite degraded. And the paint, for instance, in that balustrade is holding that handrail together. And this was one of the paint scrapings that was taken on the site, which kind of reveals, I guess, some of the layers of the paint over time and how the building had evolved. The other concept was all about interventions in the heritage fabric, and the key, I guess, areas that we looked at was obviously the internal gallery spaces, where we had to put secondary wall layers to facilitate any sort of hanging or curatorial that the art gallery wished to put on the walls. And then the other two main areas were the courtyards and obviously the decks. This is just showing parts of the veranda. So on your left, we've actually added over the existing veranda to create a level platform for access. The middle image shows the decking, where we replaced crow's ash, which was now extinct, with tallow wood, so it would last another 100 years. And then the image to the right shows how the new fabric actually meshed with the existing fabric. So this is just a plan which shows, I guess, the main building, the two courtyards in question for our intervention. So previously, this is a really dark sort of space, and each of the buildings, as you recall, in the main master plan, were all incrementally kind of added to the site, and there wasn't anything unifying it. So we looked at the courtyard as a unifying device where it was an extension of the gallery program and could be utilised throughout the year.
One of the major problems with this, the circulation systems is that it wasn't logical. So to actually navigate your way to the lower level was a challenge. And some of the staircases are still being used by school students, and we weren't allowed to use those stairs. So the solution in wayfinding and navigation was using this courtyard as well as a new staircase, which you'll see in a minute.
So this was that secondary courtyard and that device, I guess, that you were referring to, Hamilton. And the idea here was to basically dematerialise the new stair with a lush landscape, subtropical landscape, to give a different experience as you connected the main level or the ground level to the main gallery.
So we also used the veranda, because that's where the original lift was, to act as both a wayfinding and circulation route. And so this new stair plugs into the veranda quite adjacent to the lift to make it equitable.
So this is, I guess, the main ground level, and this kind of shows the connection to the front entry. And there are 4 gallery spaces on this level. The main challenge is, well, for the project, previously was getting people up to that front door. So this really became the part of the main, I guess, intervention for the front, and it included ramps and platform lifts to make it accessible. There are a lot of, prototypes for the galleries, and this is one that we worked with Heritage to kind of get a solution that worked for everyone. And this is, I guess, a prototype in looking at how we could build out that secondary wall to hang all the art from without interfering with the existing heritage fabric. And the other thing was also how we could actually get services to the back of that panel. So there was Wi-Fi, data, and electrical that we actually had to get in behind there. And this is the result where you just kind of get a little leg every now and again to get that feed of all of those services from the floor. A couple of things that we actually had to change during construction. This is one of the main ones, which was underneath that beautiful grand stair, which is original, with a little door called the portress door. And even though it wasn't, I guess, stipulated as a significant moment in the building, I think we learned about the story of the portress, and we thought it would be better to leave it intact. So we had to reroute our circulation out to the veranda, and we had to catalogue bricks and make openings, and all of that fabric that you see in the bottom left corner was the previous window, which was then removed, and an access door was created out to that main courtyard space. Which brings you out to this moment. Again, I guess looking at that, the veranda from the House of Mercy, it was very enclosed before and had no language. It didn't speak to the courtyard. Once we started to reveal the layers and open it back up, it actually created a whole new space in the centre of the plan.
It should be noted that one of the drivers for covering this courtyard obviously was to create sort of a larger gathering space, because there were very limited. It was very compartmentalised as accommodation for the sisters. The other challenge was the building was so fragile that we really couldn't put any new mechanical systems. So the courtyard roof actually supports all of the new mechanical systems for the building, without it being having any major visual impact. And
a part of, I guess, the project, this part evolved during the process. The chapel stair previously, I guess, was a way or a vestibule to get to the actual chapel, whereas now it actually became part of the circulation route for the gallery. So this area was, I guess, refurbished, and the actual chapel list, which is a list of all of the sisters within the congregation who have actually passed on. This is, I guess, an artwork that actually lists all of their names, and that extends down that hallway and now within the actual stairwell. And there's some a new light artwork that's actually been created by Megan Strader. And you can see the original stairs were kept intact. To make them compliant, we actually had to do a couple of things, like reduce the ball nose to stop it from being a trip hazard. So some of those interventions were really, I guess, interrogated and tried to come up with, I guess, the most simplest solution so you can hardly notice it. And then the top level is basically looking at the main gallery and the administration and also the children's gallery. And this is kind of feeding into some of the, I guess, the idea of the intervention. So we did actually, this was a really tricky room to get into. The top photo shows, I guess, how it was before as a museum. What we wanted to do is create a children's gallery in those two rooms on the right with different levels. We had to get upstairs to get into them, and so we created a new opening in the centre and linked those two rooms with this box insertion, which is effectively a big ramp, and had a little bit of fun with the end result, something that's kind of like a little, I guess, a play terrain something that was bright and still related to the sisters and the colours of the building. The school lights were chosen by the gallery staff, and we helped them to arrange and hang them in the space, which is a really lovely kind of nod back to the lead light of the original windows. The amenities were also needed to be upgraded as part of this project, and so you can see in the centre of, I guess, that main picture was a central hallway. What we did was we actually moved the circulation to the window edge on the left and opened it up, creating some very cool pink and green bathrooms for male and female. And through those windows, you kind of get a look back to the main courtyard intervention. And this is looking back into that courtyard from that top level veranda. And you can see that actual raised veranda on your left is being pulled away from the edge of the original veranda, so you can still read it. And you're looking into that artwork, which was something that we really wanted to integrate as a way of combining art and architecture. So we helped to, I guess, commission the artist to do this, and that was Sarah Parks from Small Town. So it's an uber macrame art piece which really references the craft history of the sisters. They used to do a lot of tatting lace work, so this really references that. And the thresholds to the verandas were another key moment, trying to make them as simple and sleek, I guess, as possible, but also structural. The structural finish is the actual finish, and keeping them as simple, so as not to detract from the original ornateness of the building. And then that's that connection back to the stair that Hamilton referred to earlier, which is linking the main galleries. These are some images of the original main gallery. The top black and white is actually the community room, and the lower black and white is the dining room. And that's how we originally saw it on the left as a museum. And so simple interventions of the paintwork and plastering, as well as the gallery walls and re-waxing of the floors, just so that basically the room, I guess, is the background and the art is what you visually recognise in the space. And that's the last image, one of the, I think, best verandas in Brisbane.
It's certainly, post-COVID, worth a visit. Thank you.
And thank you to Melissa and Hamilton for that great walkthrough. The galleries at the end are just gorgeous. Next up, a gentleman who, if you've been tuning in, you would have seen either this time last week or earlier this week, I can't remember. But next up is Morgan Jenkins from Nelson Jenkins with yet another shortlisted project, Barden House. Morgan.
Thanks, Julie. Okay. Hi, everybody. It's a real honour to be, to have gotten this little project this far in this category. I think it's a really different project to all the other ones, and Sims White's projects are really lovely, and Wilson's also. So it's an interesting thing for us, and it may be a bit of a contentious entrant into this category, as it's not actually technically a heritage building. We sort of approached the Institute and to get their support in putting it forward, and we ended up doing it. So it's been really nice to see it go this far. It's a much simpler brief, much simpler client, much simpler building fabric, and it's a much younger building than these buildings. But we have a position that this era of building doesn't feature in the heritage discussions much at all. And as such, it's sort of open to easy demolition, and we sort of see it as a really, really important piece in the progression of where we are now in our sort of subtropical architectural style as Queenslanders. Yeah, so we were sort of asked initially by the jury, sort of preempted it, saying that we wanted to know, we assumed they would want to know why we thought it was a heritage project, and also what we had done. We're really wary that people might see it as a sort of a retro fit out of a cool retro building, but it's a project for us that as we sort of got more and more into it, we learned a lot about the architecture and the intent of the architect, and then the detailing, the cleverness of the arrangement on the site, and the ambition of it. And then we actually had a chance to meet him. So it was designed by Gavin Litfin in 1971. He studied here and then went abroad to Yale, and he came back and he built a bunch of projects around that time. The project is a really simple plan on a wedge-shaped block in Barden. It sort of picks up the city to one side and then views up towards Mount Cootha to the west, and then to the city to the southeast. And it occupies a ridge-top site, so it's a single story, and you come in under a really flat canopy and get this amazing sense of surprise as the section opens up to allow you that sort of sweeping view. You can even see down to sort of Spices Peak, I think it's called, and you can certainly see Torquay and the whole of Highgate Hill. We didn't get access to this drawing until much later in the piece when we were able to find it. But it was interesting, some of the moves that we made were actually moves that were intended in the original plans. This is Gavin's plan, by the way. And that hadn't been realised in the first instance. So it was designed for a family, and they lived there from 71 till 2014, when it was sold to its current owner. The block, what we like about the project, what we think is of immense value to sort of the architectural lineage of Queensland, is a few of the features that it pushes the building and the building mass towards the edge of the site to create meaningful and private external space and external rooms. It maintains a really thin plan to maximise natural light and ventilation. It's got an expressed materiality, in this case sort of brickwork and weatherboards, and then a clever, cost-effective way of assembling that suite of materials. That we, all of these things we aspire to in our own work. It's got a very, very clearly choreographed circulation pattern, and plays on that idea of surprise in the section, revealing the view. And then it connects an occupant of this site within these fictitious boundaries into a much, much bigger landscape setting, that in a way that very, very few Queenslanders do explicitly, and the sort of traditional building stock of the city. So when we arrived at the site, it was in a pretty bad way internally. Externally, because of the expressed materiality, it sort of required very, very little upkeep. There was a lot of rot around the windows and timber elements, but it doesn't require any painting, and as such was in very good condition externally. The roof was in a bit of disarray, but as you can see from these photos, it's sort of, as you come in, there was no sense of arrival past the front door, and the internal spaces were quite dark. And this wall on the right here comes back to this wall, which was a sewing and ironing room, and with a window in there above the stairs that didn't ever get realised in the initial build. So that's this wall here on the right. But you can see in this shoddily Photoshop montage the darkness, but also that arrival from being on ground into the house, and then through the angles of the house connected into this much bigger landscape, and sort of this feeling of hovering in the canopy of the trees. Our client had been looking for a house at this period for a while, and she was really keen. She loved this period of housing, and she was really keen for a project. So she was keen to look at it as a restoration, as were we. And the more and more we got into the documentation of the house in the initial stages, the more we got out of it, and we started to understand the way that Gavin had detailed it, and this really clever, cost-effective way. So in terms of our work, it was going from a family house to a much smaller client base. So security was an issue, and privacy. And so we installed a courtyard off the street to manage security and provide another threshold. We reoriented the living room. We used new sort of sliding door technologies to open up into the courtyard in a more effective way. We took out that sewing room and introduced a little fireplace snug that allowed us to open up through the plan to connect into that view from much deeper, much closer to the entry. We reoriented the bedroom towards the view, because all of a sudden privacy internally wasn't as much of an issue. And then we extended there was a small deck in the northeastern corner that we extended and dropped down with a solid balustrade, so it would edit the new neighbour to the east out of the view, and still maximise the view of the city. We also extended a small wing through this northern edge across a deck that was already there, sort of a barbecue deck that was an extension of the kitchen, just for privacy. We also had this idea of sort of arranging a series of skylights throughout the plan in the darkest points that would sort of allow the circulation to sort of operate around them, and allow these sort of splashes of colour and connection to the sky, which you didn't have in the original building, to sort of mark the passing of the day and seasons of clouds. And then downstairs, excuse me, we sort of inherited this plan to many aspects, but a lot of it was rectification of existing retaining walls. It was all built within the existing structure downstairs, and we just inserted a new bedroom, a bathroom, and laundry into that space, but an existing staircase through the middle of that void. And so that's the section showing through that staircase, through that central atrium, and then up to the deck. So from the street, many people sort of, it's been amazing how many people have recognised the house when we, since we published it. As you can see, a very low slung house that very unassuming from the street. And also on this, I think it's really important to note the sort of commitment from the owner as well in this as a restoration project. I mean, this block of land, to knock this house down would have been totally within her rights to put 2 stories on this block on the view. The city view would have been totally within her rights. And I think people who are sort of, I don't know, it was a massive commitment from her, and I think she just loves it. So it's just really sort of satisfying to give it, make some small changes to it to give it another whole lifespan for new people. This is through that entry courtyard. You can see that we've sort of, that arrival sequence playing on that, the geometry, that really simple geometry from Gavin's plan, introducing new door systems. Lockie made that door to allow ventilation through the plan and security. And down through the middle of the plan, all that sort of cupped timber panelling is original. The window to the left is obviously that new insertion, and this piece of joinery. In the research around this era of house, we sort of discovered that the joinery units often, acted in to support circulation routes and sort of the division of space, but without going to the ceiling. So the walls could be the walls, the posts could be the posts, and then these joinery pieces would sort of act like fixed furniture within the space to differentiate the rooms and keep the sort of nice small scale of each of the areas, but allowing connection through them. A look across the kitchen on your left, staircase straight ahead, and then the fireplace snug on the left. In the original house, they had this really beautiful handmade tiles that the client loved, but we couldn't keep them. So we sort of got these ones in from San Francisco that, so we've used them as this sort of motif of these splashes of colour through the scheme in all these in these light wells. And the bathrooms have skylights to sort of pull the colour and the light back into the plane. We were fortunate enough to meet Gavin at the end and have him through the house and hear the stories of when it was first done. And it's sort of a really rewarding thing, and certainly we of course asked his blessing before putting it into the award, and he's quite stoked, I think. So I mean, for us, it's just, whether or not it goes any further is one thing, but for us, it's a really important conversation to raise, I think. This, sort of assigning some significance to not just the old in Brisbane sort of colonial architecture standards, architecture as the heritage stuff, but all the steps along the way. To us, it's just outrageous that the D house could be knocked over tomorrow completely in its rights, and it's way more important than just a standard 1880s Queensland workers' cottage. It's sort of like assigning value to these steps along the way that have allowed us, to progress in the architecture of the state. That's it for me, Julie. Thanks very much. Good luck, guys. Yeah, thanks, Julie.
Thanks very much, Morgan. It's so fulfilling the care and generosity that you have put into that project. I get the sense that you feel a bit like a a small fish in a big pond in this particular category. Would that be right? Sorry, without putting you on the spot. Thanks very much, Morgan. It's so fulfilling the care and generosity that you have put into that project. I get the sense that you feel a bit like a small fish in a big pond in this particular category. Would that be right? Sorry, without putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I think it's different. You know, it's a really different project, and it as I said earlier, it's got sort of the complexity of these massive ones that Stephen and Hamilton and were talking about. But you know, it doesn't compare to that complexity, and I think it's a really different thing. But what we hoped by putting it in is that it starts a conversation, a formal conversation around these era of houses that, you know, I don't think, you know, I don't know, as architects, we can't really complain when the buildings get knocked over if we don't do something to recognise them in the short term, because otherwise, and I think it's something about recognising not just age, but the value of these stepping stones along the path. And for us, we feel really satisfied even just to have that conversation as a formal one and an open one, and we're not trying to say that what we've done is sort of negotiating the complexities that,
well, I think
Sims White and the Wilsons have done.
I think there's something to be said of depth as well as span, you know, in terms of thinking about the larger project, the scale, as you say. But this is about intimacy and depth. That's a really interesting juxtaposition. Do you? And
here, and maybe heritage on a residential scale and heritage on a public scale. But you know, and even since putting it in, I've had a lot of people say they're doing work. You know, Paul Hodgson from Form said to me the other day that he's been working on this really beautiful house that Gama Bailey did, and you know, everything they've done is within the envelope of the original house, but they've just been reorienting things, and he doesn't know, you know, he didn't know whether to put it into any awards, because it's you know, on one hand it is a really sensitive Alton Ads project, but I don't know, that the calibre of the original building is something that needs to be celebrated and recognised, and that's, for me, it's more actually about acknowledging how good Gavin's building is.
Yes. And
we've done little things to, you know, some of the things that we did were in his original plans that didn't get built like that. So it's I don't know.
Do you have anything that you'd like to share on that particular topic, Stephen? I can see you nodding away.
Yeah. Look, I'm just sitting there listening to you, Morgan, going, you know, the similarities, like as an architect, it's the ultimate compliment, I think, if someone comes along and does an alteration to your building and actually doesn't just railroad it and actually put some thought into how can my work have a conversation with that? And I mean, it's interesting. You've done it so beautifully and eloquently, and you know, I was looking at it and listening to you talk about everything you did, and it was taking me back to City Hall. You know, it's all of those things we were doing, uncovering the layers, and then how does our extension and how do our insertions have a meaningful dialogue back to that building, and how can we do something new that is in the spirit of the old, but unashamedly new? And I think, you know, for that reason, I think you've probably put it in the right category as a heritage project. So, I mean, congratulations.
Thanks, man.
All righty. Well, thank you for that little impromptu conversation that I had not briefed you about at all. Appreciate it. Finally, I'm going to throw back to you, Stephen, so that you can walk us through your other shortlisted project, The Good Shed.
No worries. I'll just share the screen. Okay. So this is The Good Shed, project we did in conjunction with Shane Thompson. And again, it's the other park at the other end of town, also for Toowoomba Regional Council, but you know, complete opposite from a heritage point of view and from a project point of view. City Hall was very much, you know, this amazing, beautiful, highly detailed building, and the shed is one of these rude, vernacular, heroic structures that that really represents our heritage. It's an older building. It dates from the 1880s, the original part. This portion here was built in the 1880s. Then there was a small extension on the front. There's several other extensions onto that. And then there was an extension onto the rear in 1910 or thereabouts. But, you know, it was a project that had these, and I don't think I'm going to have time to get to it, but at the back end of my slideshow, I've got a thing about the aspirations for what this project would mean to the city of Toowoomba. And that was part of our project, and probably the part that Shane really helped us with was working through that urban fabric stuff. We've done heritage and done large projects, but you know, at that massive urban realm, was something that his expertise really helped with. But the reality of it was a project that, even at the start, we knew we probably had about 80% of the budget we needed to do the project. And then we ended up spending roughly 25–30% of our budget on latent conditions. So it was a real struggle, despite all the work we did to try and avoid that. So this is Toowoomba CBD again. Just the shed up here. It's tacked onto the railway yards, and Toowoomba's first settlement was up here on West Street, down to the creek. Toowoomba has two creeks, West Creek and East Creek. They come together underneath this road here and form Gowrie Creek, which is the upper reaches of the Condamine. So we're on the edge of a creek and a railway yard, and so this land has been cut off from the CBD for 150 years. So there's a plan to build a park, a linear park here. There's a park that runs for 5 or 6 kilometres along East Creek here, and similarly pockets of park along West Creek. So there's a plan to actually formalise this park here, and then build a pedestrian link on the end of Campbell Street here. And you'll see this is our office here. So it's actually very, we did a lot of walking to and from site. And but anyway, so this is a shed as it was in 1886, just after it was opened, and it has this amazing lunette window. This view is actually probably from over here somewhere, near the Spotted Cow, those of you that know Toowoomba, looking across the old flour mills towards the shed across the creek. So here's the view from the other side. The shed lives roughly here. You can see the railway lines there. That is 1877. So the station was designed by FDG Stanley, the colonial architect, and built in 1873. The shed was the second railway shed on the site. It was built in 1884 and then extended in 1912. So we're really fortunate. We actually had some pretty good records on this site, and also conversations with people that have worked there. So we had these beautiful old drawings to work from. And it's kind of one of those buildings that, you know, where City Hall was about us making interventions and interpretations, this ended up, partly because we had no money, ended up being a straight conservation project. And at certain times we had to make some really tough decisions about what to save because we only had so much money. And it was in really bad shape when we found it. So what's interesting about the shed is the construction method. It's almost like we build concrete buildings these days with piles and then pile caps or ground beams, and then a concrete structure on top of it, except it's all timber. So this is the ground line here. Here's the train platforms. So what you've got is you've got you've got timber piles driven into the ground, and then timber ground beams, and then these timber posts that were mortised into those beams below the level of aerobic activity. I mean, and that worked for a period, but ultimately the rot and the termites had their way. This is the little extension on the front, 1916. So we had some further complications here with the project. It's part of a PDA, which basically meant that DES were removed from the decision-making process, which actually made it really difficult for us. We had no one to say yes, no, that's for sure. And the whole way through the project, we were having to make these decisions ourselves. So part of what we did to at least inform our client was this set of drawings, which actually, we probably should have done the colours the other way around, but you know, the lightest green were the most significant elements, down through to red were things that basically can we please get rid of them. So you'll see that the cladding, the roof, the front building was sort of significant. We did remove some of these extra additions to tidy up the front a bit. There were all these demountables inside the shed itself. And then the platforms themselves were quite significant. Some of the cladding had been replaced. So really we tried to strip the building back. So here's the shed as we found it. Members completely missing. This is from a structural report where the guy took out a hammer and swung it at a beam and managed to bury it within the beam. We had overland flow running right through the shed, which was causing a lot of the issues. This is a termite mound, and to give you an idea of scale, those logs are about 500 mil diameter. So that's a huge termite mound. These are the demountables and just the dirt floor. And then we had this patchwork of cladding, which unfortunately I lost on that one after we'd replaced large amounts of the other cladding, and a client that wanted to remove all the lead-based paint. Sadly, it ended up getting painted. I was quite keen to sort of leave one facade as it was and in a real sort of patchwork. So the first thing we did was employed some timber experts to run through the building. There are 33 frames here, these beautiful timber trusses. The shed's sort of 24 metres, 23 metres across. And each of these members at the bottom is 12 metres long and 300 by 150 in Oregon. The wall framing is largely blue gum, and the purlins are all blue gum as well. Sorry. Yes, but the trusses themselves are mostly Oregon. Don't ask me what Oregon was doing in Queensland in the 1880s. So they actually did these sort of bay by bay grading and stress grading of the timber, visually stress grading it, as well as tracking where the damage was. And you could actually follow, you know, here that a termite had got in the wall and they'd eaten their way through whole members, and from some of the sections. It was really sort of quite telling. And Lytana, just their documentation was incredible, what they did here. So we spent a lot of time trying to look at how we could do that, and then just how we were going to detail all the strengthening to bring it up to current codes and do it in a way that was as unobtrusive and you know, as minimally interventionist as we could. So we made a decision very early on, to leave all of the new timber as it was. There's one of those 300 by 150 members, and to let the plates just be black. So, you know, and it probably became a bit of a philosophy for this project. Everything was downplayed, and just because, look, the building's so heroic on its own that we could just let it be. So these are the original crane bridging beams. So they had a suspended hook here. So the shed was a good shed. It had platform down each side and 2 train tracks in the middle, and you'd back your dray up on one side, and the crane had reached, there was a little recess into the platform that you could back your dray into, and these cranes would swing out, pick stuff off the dray, and then they could swing around and dump it onto the cart. So here it is with its we had we rebuilt the platforms but reinstated all the decking. Look, modern safety has demanded we put rails back in, but they're all removable. Reinstated all the rail tracks and they are still usable. And then basically we had to redo all of the footings. So we've just cut everything off at the same level and done this base plate detail. But look, on the whole, it's something that it just shines. I mean, you go in there, it's an amazing space and it just swallows any event. So functionally, it performs a, here's what got built. Functionally, it performs a job that's missing in Toowoomba. We have the Empire Theatre that seats 1,500. We have quite a lot of theatres the size of like the City Hall one that we talked about before that seat 500, but we have no large flat floor venue for indoor events like conferences or whatever. So this shed's 120 something metres long by 23 metres wide, and we have platform that wraps around here. And then so the whole idea in the end is that we've got an address to the city here, which has quite a strong presence down this street. And then you enter into here, and eventually it is hoped that we have sort of more permanent functions in here with an operable wall or some sort of line of enclosure across here. And then this is a big open event space. We did include in the concept the ability to put a stage and some green rooms and storage down this end. But it has these massive roller shutters here that allow trains still to come in, but also this to open onto this finger park that will extend another 200 metres roughly in this direction in the future. So the whole idea again is sort of this split functionality. We sort of called this the crossing, so that this could be used as one space, this could be used as another, or the whole space can be used. So there was designed another set of toilets to go in here. Again, we didn't have money for those. There was designed for one of these to become a commercial kitchen. Again, we didn't have money for that. But what we did do was we had to bring services from 400 metres away, and we put in these pods the whole way, every 8 metres or something down the shed that allowed the facilities to be brought in vans, and it's become a really sort of successful indoor venue. It almost functions a bit like Miami Marquetta if you've ever been down there on the coast. But food vans come in. So these are the little insertions we made, these pods for storage and for toilets. And again, they're very downplayed. Recycled VJ that we found off site. I was really keen again to just have those go up in a random pattern in the random 1950s pale blues, greens, pinks and yellows that they came in. But again, the council, they're very safety conscious and they didn't want lead-based paint anywhere, and we couldn't find any that were free of lead-based paint. So well, they went and got stripped. So I guess one of the key features of the shed is these beautiful doors, and there's a number of different types of them. So this was our insertion. They were all reconditioned, and we had sort of drawings of each individual door, cataloguing the work to be done. And again, it was all very hands-off. All of this sort of half-crazed varnish is all still left on there. But being Toowoomba's climate, we basically created these secondary doors so that we could open them up on days like today and have natural light in the shed, but then we could be stopping all the cold westerlies. We saved and repaired all the scales that were there and had them recalibrated, and they're still there. You can go and stand on them and weigh yourself, and the kids have a lot of fun when they're in there. So, this is an original door that was here, and there was a recess in the platform. Some of those had been infilled, and we just reinstated what was there. We left all the signage, we exposed all the services. Everyone thought I was nuts, saying let's just have it a bright colour and just leave it in those Australian standard colours. But after it all went up, it sort of adds to that industriality, I guess, of the building. And here we go. This was opening night. The contractor that owns the guy that owns the building firm actually had this vintage car, and he was pretty excited to bring it along, and it sort of added to the event. So you know, then we had this whole issue of interpretation and how do we deal with those bed logs? That the bed logs had to be removed. They were all, we didn't find anything in the ground that was salvageable. So we ended up doing these little details of how we might deal with things from interpretation point of view. We found hundreds and hundreds of bottles and shoes and newspapers. But in the end, we settled on a variation of this where we salvaged some of the logs and we left 3 of them in a row at the front end of the shed, and then a 4th one right at the far end where that bed log, the original part of the shed had the bed log exposed, and then the extension had it below ground. So we had 3 of them in a row at the front end, and then a 4th one halfway down the shed where that ended. So there's this sort of interpretive story there for those that would understand that. We left all these signs and posters that we found and put glass over them to protect them. But so here's the shed in all its glory as you come in that front entrance. The bed logs here, there's another one down about there. And this was the very first event in the shed, which was really appropriate for the shed. It was an art installation by a guy called Dan, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry, but it was called Deathgate, and those of you that have been to Auschwitz know that the train tracks lead through the gate, and that was the entrance that everybody came in on. And the train tracks lead up to the shed, and that's the entrance everybody came in on for this. What he did was make, over the period of Auschwitz was operational for 3 years or whatever it was. And over the exact same period that Auschwitz was open, he made a little clay-fired piece of ceramic for every person that was in the camp. And this pile here, and they're about the size of a grape. This pile here represents the number that died, and that smaller pile at the end represents the number that survived. And it is the most amazing, powerful exhibition, and probably, you know, the shed was a perfect venue for it because of that connection to railway. So moving along, we used as many of the existing openings where as we could, and where we made new insertions, we made them as simple as possible. Frameless glass. This is that view back to the city. Along that road, and this is turning around facing the other way, and this is that sort of that crossing there. We had more glass, more lights in the roof, so that it sort of has a clear line between one and the other. So it is a building that just has this presence both internally and externally to the city. You see it from so much. The roof is so strong. And it, you know, it was just actually a pleasure in hindsight at the end of it all, after all the drama of all the latent conditions. You know, it was one of those projects where we had 30 bore logs in the ground, and you could dig a hole 1.5 meters away from a bore log and get a totally different soil result from what was there. And you know, in peeling off the lead-based paint on the roof, we found asbestos paint underneath it and ended up having to replace the entire roof. So, you know, things like that do not don't help a budget. But the reality of it is, we've been left with this amazing piece of infrastructure that really is a catalyst for the redevelopment of this part of the city. And it's something that's, you know, it's a beautiful building, and it just has, like I said, it has this amazing presence on its own. And probably it was kind of after City Hall where there was all this angst over, are we doing the right thing here? What should we be doing? It was kind of nice almost to have no money and it just to be straight conservation and just respecting the building and trying to do the right thing by it. So that's the shed. Amazing, atmospheric, moody building. Has this fantastic relationship to the creek here, which I'm hoping in stage 2, when they get money to build the rest of this park, will be made more of, and that this here will become a big outdoor music venue when those big roller shutters come up. So there it is in action. recent council elections, the Brews and Barbie Bash. I think that's a similar event. And then, you know, the sit-down dinner for the Chamber of Council Excellence Awards. So I guess, like, I probably haven't got time, I don't think, to run through the greater detail about how that works in the city and all of those aspirations. But I think you probably get a glimpse of it in those photos about what it can be. And now, as a local architect, it's fantastic to be involved in both of these projects. But City Hall, I'm very proud of as a firm, what we achieved and what it did. But the shed, as a resident of town, is something that really excites me and what it can be, and as a catalyst for our city. So, like Morgan said, it's an honour to have one project make it this far, and I think we're doubly excited about the prospect of two. So thank you to our council for their trust in us, and thank you to the jurors for recognising 2-3 years of hard work.
And thank you for that wonderful presentation. You could tell that was a passion project. The levity in your voice spoke volumes, actually. Thank you, and to you too, Morgan, for coming along and presenting today. I want to wish you both, and also Melissa and Hamilton, who couldn't be with us today, all the best in the State Awards, which will be being streamed at 7 p.m. on Thursday, the 9th of July. Good luck. And to everybody who's tuning in, thank you. Coming up on Monday, the 8th of June, will be the shortlisted entries for the FDG Stanley Award for Public Architecture. Stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.
Surely.
Thank you.